Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode.
Working on OpenShift
and sometimes
Kubernetes.
we haven't.
This is so
we
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
It's actually
in
a big
importance of
piece of the component for your GitOps work.
Everybody has something that they can say.
On top of the Red Hat portfolio.
Almost lost it there. Anyway, sorry. Good afternoon, GitOpsians. We are live with Martin Jackson from Validated Patterns team, who I will make bigger. First solo episode for me without our official production crew or any actual backup. And it's wild. It's really wild. I feel so split-brained right now trying to do all the things. I can't wait to get more help again. I'm never doing this without asking Johnny for help ever again, I think is the takeaway here. But anyway, no real announcements this week. A couple just like brief reminders that end of this month is KubeCon North America in Detroit. There is a day zero co-located event again, GitOpsCon. I think Christian Hernandez will be there. I feel like he'll be there. And if not, then a bunch of other great people will be there. I think Chris Short and others. So that said, if you're going there live in person, I'm not, but I hope you have a great time. You know, send postcards or something. And with that, we're just going to get straight into this week's stream. Here with me today, I have Martin Jackson. Martin is the he's a friend that I made. I'm going to call you a friend. Yeah, he's a friend that I made during the what do you call it? DevConf Boston. Wow, really just not with the language right now. Sorry. DevConf Boston, where he gave a talk that I didn't see, but I had gotten a bit of a rundown of as we practiced our talks to each other in the lobby outside of our respective rooms. And I realized that he's working on a team that was a little bit familiar to some people called the Validated Patterns team. And as I looked into that, I went, oh my goodness, this is everything I literally need in my life. Yes, with the coolest coolest triangle ever. And with that introduction done, I'm going to let Martin introduce himself, maybe explain the triangle. It has a special name that I forget. And I'm just going to be quiet now and let you do your thing.
Yeah, sure. It's great to be on here. I've been with Red Hat just a little over a year now. And, they were forming the Validated Patterns team just as I was starting. And so I was brought into ecosystem engineering, and I was, kind of looking for a permanent home at Red Hat. And I was given the option of working with the Validated Patterns team. And I did not realize that the team was just getting started. The team was about 2 weeks old when I joined it last July. Yep. Anthony and Lester and Johnny are all on the team with me. So, they all know this story really well. I didn't realize it was as new as it was when it started. So I've basically been involved with Validated Patterns for almost the entire time that the team has existed in Red Hat. Now, before I joined, there was a vision of what Validated Patterns would be and could be that was promoted by Anthony and by William Henry, who's another engineer on our team. The idea behind Validated Patterns is that we have a huge number of options and things that we can do with OpenShift infrastructure and with application deployment. And internally at Red Hat, we have a number of challenges with how do we come up with ways of testing all of this stuff? How do we have ways of, making sure that things work from release to release? How do we show to customers what they can do with this infrastructure? Because, internally, we talk about what we call the empty cluster problem, that, customers can potentially buy OpenShift and then not really know what to do with it because cloud native architectures are so different from traditional VM-based and bare metal-based architectures. So what we do in the validated pattern space is what we think is a solution to all of those problems. The team, the team logo is called the Sierpinski triangle, which is a kind of fractal. And the idea with fractals is that the more you zoom into a fractal, the more fractals you see. And the unofficial motto of the team is it's patterns all the way down. And so we start by installing application infrastructure onto an OpenShift cluster. And we start that with Argo CD, the GitOps operator. And by having an opinionated way of installing the GitOps operator, we have a fairly generalized way of installing basically anything that can be installed on OpenShift. And one of the important things that we do as well is to extend the framework to include things that aren't necessarily themselves OpenShift or cloud native. Because we believe that the notion of GitOps applies equally as well to different kinds of desired state configuration management. And desired state configuration management was something that I did quite a lot of before I joined Red Hat. Now, as you can see, a bunch of these links that are being published in the chat are links to our specific team pages, and they describe exactly what our validated patterns are and give you some examples of, kind of some of the things that are available using our framework. The standard starter pattern that we point people to is multi-cloud GitOps. And just to understand sort of where we see the value of these particular patterns. You have a cluster and you have some application that you want to install on it, all well and good. But there are lots of different ways of installing that particular application on that cluster. You have your choice of whether you're going to build the manifests yourself and just install those manifests, or you can use a configuration management helper like Helm or Customize. And what we do is we start with a Helm chart that then has the ability to install other Helm or Customize applications. And as you add applications to this to one of these patterns, you can rapidly see these different pieces working. And then because of the way the applications are added, since they're modular, they can be added as either charts or whatever you call a customized application, or an external chart potentially. Even recently, we added the ability to add application sets in Argo. Basically, any artifact that Argo allows you to install, you can install through our framework. And because we sort of standardize the way that you can lay these things out and specify them, create namespaces, create projects, add operators and subscriptions, and also add managed clusters. One of the very distinctive things about our framework is that we integrate, although we do not require, Red Hat's Advanced Cluster Manager, so that you can have multiple clusters working together in concert with each other. One of the key things about multi-cloud GitOps is that it demonstrates a hub cluster, which is running Red Hat Advanced Cluster Manager, and it manages some number of managed clusters, which can all be added to an entity that we call Region 1. And if so, they will all together run a single application, which is a config demo. And then the rest of multi-cloud GitOps demonstrates a HashiCorp Vault-based mechanism for storing secrets securely and publishing those secrets into your validated pattern, so that you can, instead of only keeping your secrets on your laptop or doing something else that you know that you probably shouldn't be doing with secrets. You can store them securely in Vault, and then we use in the pattern we use the external secrets operator to extract those secrets from Vault and publish them as native Kubernetes secrets. So this framework gives us a lot of power and a lot of flexibility to express a lot of different application architectures. One thing that I want to talk about before we get too far along this road is what we mean by the notion of validated. We currently draw distinctions between 3 different levels of patterns, and really we have firm plans for 2 of those levels. The first level of pattern is a community pattern, which is something that is posted to our upstream community site, which is not yet listed there on the in the chat for the stream so far. I'll put the link in here.
My bad. I was doing such a good job on the links. I totally didn't.
That's fine.
Didn't have
That's
that
fine.
one ready to go. Well, there we are.
Yep.
That is now in the chat.
Thank you. So that is where the validated pattern journey begins. A pattern is published to this site, and you can, if you go there, you can see some of the patterns that we have available currently. Multi-cloud GitOps, of course, is there. Ansible Edge GitOps I worked on recently. Industrial Edge 2.0 was actually the first pattern that we developed. We also have medical diagnosis, and we've got a couple of patterns that are in flight. So, this should give you an idea of what different kinds of cluster topologies and different application architectures we can show using this framework. And the point of the framework is to standardize and, to give people well understood and functional ways of understanding how multiple different components of the OpenShift ecosystem can work together. And of course, we have a fairly broad understanding of what OpenShift ecosystem means. If you can start with Argo CD, we consider it fair game for including in a pattern. And Ansible Edge GitOps, which is the most recent one that's been submitted by me to the community site and is on its way to being a validated pattern, includes the idea of OpenShift virtualization, where it will run RHEL VMs for you. It will spin up Ansible automation platform. Inside OpenShift, it will completely configure Ansible automation platform's controller with a project and with execution environments in order to demonstrate running a container workload on a RHEL image. And the RHEL images are run under OpenShift virtualization. So these patterns ship as very involved demos as Git repositories. But the Git repository that we ship the pattern as gives you everything that you need outside of the actual infrastructure to run the pattern yourself. So if you have the ability, for example, to provision AWS infrastructure and to run OpenShift installer against AWS infrastructure, then you can run one of these patterns. And because this is a Red Hat project and product, it's all open source. You have the ability to download and customize them to your heart's content. And we actually kind of hope that you will be inspired by some of the things that we do in these validated patterns, to explore different aspects of how OpenShift works, to see, how, kind of we think that you should do things. Of course, we're engineers. Our word isn't necessary, just because we do it a certain way doesn't mean you have to do it a certain way. Constraints vary in different places. There are lots of reasons for doing things differently. But, because this is a community project, we're really looking for that feedback to say, what is it that you like? What is it that you don't like? What would you like to see improved? Internally at Red Hat, we're experiencing, a lot of interest in this framework. And so several engineers from our partner teams have also recently started contributing community patterns, to our GitHub space, which is the hybrid cloud pattern space. And very soon, I think we'll see documentation for those patterns start to appear here on our community site. And as we work through the process, this is where we get back to what we mean by validated. Some patterns will have Red Hat resources committed to them, and will have additional Red Hat investment in the sense of quality assurance and quality engineering and engineering time added to them, such that they will be supported by Red Hat, so that if these patterns break, you can file a ticket against them, and a Red Hat engineer, maybe me, maybe someone else, will look into it and fix the problem with the pattern. We've also had a lot of opportunities to sort of socialize with a lot of the different product groups inside of Red Hat. One of the things that's unusual or unique about the validated patterns team is that we do not belong to a particular business unit. So, internally, Red Hat is divided into the RHEL business unit, Ansible business unit, OpenShift business unit, and people who work, engineers who work for those different business units, have certain kinds of, priorities that are set because of what their business unit is. We are part of the ecosystem engineering organization, which means we don't necessarily, we don't belong to a particular business unit. We have an interest in seeing all those business units be successful. And so we are, because of what we do with patterns, we're in a unique position to, to try new things as the new releases come out. And we've been involved in several, fairly interesting integration edge cases between the GitOps operator, new releases of OpenShift, and all kinds of fun things. And it's really exciting as a place to be from an engineering standpoint. So key takeaway here is what we mean by validated is that a pattern which follows our framework will also be, if it graduates to the level of validated pattern, will also have additional Red Hat resources attached to it, primarily in the QA, QE, and documentation areas, which will expand upon and curate that documentation for the downstream validated pattern site that was posted to earlier. Yeah, there are a lot of interesting areas of application architecture and things that we've had a chance to explore within the patterns framework already. I suppose it's kind of interesting that we are, the validated patterns effort was really an outgrowth of Red Hat's Edge investments. And Edge, of course, is that great big area of IT outside of the data center, where Red Hat has traditionally had strong offerings without necessarily even realizing it. And so Red Hat has kind of officially, made Edge a kind of priority, and is working on being a bigger presence and being more front of mind for people in their Edge IT needs for things like sensors and industrial technologies and so on. And so because of that, one of the early areas of validated patterns that we explored first was industrial automation and the use of sensor data and AI ML training based on that sensor data and analysis and analytics that are based on that sensor data as well. So the Industrial Edge 2.0 pattern shows gathering of simulated sensor data, forecast of failures of sensors based on temperature and pressure variations of simulated pumps, and then a feedback loop that uses the Seldon operator to predict when a pump is likely to fail, and then feedback of that information by storing it, by transporting it through Kafka, storing it in an S3 bucket, and then it's available to be analyzed with Jupyter notebooks, and ODH and other machine learning analysis tools. So one of the things that I really want to impress here is that the kinds of things that we deliver with validated patterns are, fairly complex multi-product demonstrations. And it's really, really important that the consumer only have to bring their own infrastructure to be able to run the pattern. The pattern should have all of the instructions necessary to completely install all the applications in a repeatable way and to be CI, CD'd, and so on. Okay, so there are a couple of questions, and I don't want to get too far ahead of that. Hi, Christian. It's been a while since we've chatted. Hope things are going well for you where you are now.
Yeah, so he's actually asking how's it different from what Andrew's doing on the team? And I really thought that you and Andrew were on the same team, but
Which
I guess
Andrew?
not. Andrew Sullivan. He's one of the hosts of Ask an OpenShift Admin. See, there you go. Just proves that I didn't know anything. Is Johnny on your team though, Martin?
Yes. Johnny is definitely on my team.
So that answers that question. Why this is important, right? And I really love that you talked about like how this applies to the Red Hat Edge strategy, because this is where like I was like the opportunities here for greater collaboration across Red Hat is huge, right? There's definitely I've been historically in the managed services space for Red Hat. So when you mention, Kafka and ODH, right? There are managed service versions of these open source offerings that like basically they come with the SRE support, right? And part of the part of the difference of the managed services, we're actually basically defining a topology for the application, and we use an operator to maintain that kind of status quo, that state for how we know the operator or how we know the application can run basically its best, which is sort of a little bit of an extension on the a validated pattern in a way. And then so the SRE team that I used to be a part of, right, we were the team supporting these managed offerings. So specifically managed Kafka was a service that I onboarded into the SRE group. ODH is Red Hat Open Data Science from the managed side. There's also Roam, Red Hat Open API Manager, which open source is 3Scale, right? And that's just like a few of them, right? There's way more managed services than that. Key or Quay, Key if you're French, Quay if you're the rest of us. So that's another managed service offering, right? So, and when we start talking about this, one of the things that I've had to do the most when working with teams to develop a managed service is try and be like, okay, here's what we know works, right? Here's the patterns that we know are good. And the biggest question I was getting, it was the hardest question to answer, was, well, what does my cluster sizing need to look like? And right, that is such a hard question. So like my favorite thing was when we were going through this initially and I saw that you guys had done cluster sizing benchmarking, right? Based on this pattern to give a starting point for this. And of course, this is just like, I guess technically you could do it with less, but it's basically like this should do you for a while, and then you go up from here, right? And I really appreciated that, and this is where I was like, okay, we're trying to get more of these things into the managed services space. We're trying to design better services, design them faster. My whole role transition recently is entirely around that mission. That's why when they let me pick my job title, I picked Chief Mermaid, because how do you even explain that that's my job, right? My job is to just purely help with the architecture of managed services in some sort of sustainable, scalable way. And so 90% of the reason for asking you to be on this episode today is that next week I'm going to a face-to-face where I'm pushing really hard for the managed services team to join in on this more and do more here and work with the validated patterns more, to really bring these two like major Red Hat initiatives of, edge computing and managed services, and like getting us doing things, in the same way as, and we're so close. We're like accidentally like on purpose. We're like so close. There's so much overlap already between what we know is good and what you all have published is good. And a lot of what we're doing, we're actually putting out through Operate First, right? And I'm sure you're familiar with Operate First. And so it's like one of those things where it's like, here we are, just, two engineers from respective teams. And I'm like, but this is like to that multi-pronged vision, right? It's like the fork has a handle, right? if you think of it that way, like that's where I think that, we as Red Hat teams are really like gonna be able to actually drive this forward, is by, putting things that ordinarily don't sound like they go together and actually making them go together, working together on these things. Because like I was mentioning to you kind of starting the stream, right? A friend in consulting, and he asked me if I could talk to a Red Hat customer about how to be successful with day 2 operations. And that's not the first time I've had a conversation like that with a customer for one of the consulting groups. And I actually both times have sent the customers Operate First and actually the validated patterns website as well, to get them started off on like the right foot. So there's a lot of really cool overlap in there, and it's because we're basically just trying to figure out what is sustainable, awesome architecture for Kubernetes. In the end, like that's the problem we're all solving. How you're applying that architecture can be very different, but that's why I get really excited about this, because it's just this body of work itself drives the Red Hat visions so well. And of course, I think the thing that we both get excited about is not only are we doing that, but then we get to open source it. Everything that all of our efforts, everything we put out, right, it gets published somewhere. Half of my engineering just looks like document writing at this moment in time, but it's still like the most exciting thing about it is like, but those documents go somewhere at least.
Yeah. And, it's hard to know, when you do something like this, sort of where, where it's going to land, or who's going to see it, or, when and how it's going to be important. One of the things that we saw recently is that, we were engaged in one of these internal partnerships with one of the other big teams, that's doing another thing that's hugely important in the edge space, and that's specifically the telco group, and the latest generation of zero-touch provisioning that the telco group is doing seems to have been influenced at least a little bit by some of the work that we've been doing in the pattern space, in that they are doing some Helm and looking into more of those things. And we're not saying that we are that we have all the answers, or even most of the answers, but by providing these things in a way that is easily consumable, that makes it a lot easier to iterate on these ideas, and gets them more benefit as a group, and to the community as a whole. It really kind of, I think, serves all our benefits, to be successful with Kubernetes and cloud native architectures, to make it as easy as possible for people to consume things. There was a time long ago when, it was a career defining moment if you could, come up with a set of things that would be, just something that we would expect a junior programmer to come up with as a data pipeline these days. It's unbelievable how far the industry has come as a whole. To kind of go back to blast from the past. I remember when we first met in Boston, we were talking about and swapping stories about writing Perl code, right?
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that Perl was so popular was that you had to glue a lot of different things together in ways that were kind of really hard to do with traditional shell scripts, because sometimes you needed to do something over the network, or you needed a complex data structure, and it was really kind of hard to do hashes, dictionaries, associative arrays, and things like that in a shell scripting framework. Typically you had to go into C, and if you're an admin, nobody got time for that. Are you going to compile the thing? Are you going to distribute it? There were lots of problems that Perl solved really, really well. And, we're still kind of looking, I think, in some ways for some of those things that are going to be analogs to, that sort of glue function that Perl scripting provided in previous generations of IT. And it's always been kind of interesting to me as an engineer to live in those ambiguous spaces where, it's not necessarily clear. You've got a real decision to make, and it's not necessarily an obvious one. Which direction do you go? If I do this, should I do that? If and it's really been a lot of fun to explore that space.
I like to say I've really made my career in that spot of engineering where process meets technology, right? And honestly, like, why did I start Perl scripting, right? I had a period of time where there was a process, right? And I needed it to meet with a technology so that it could be a sustainable process, right? And so that's why I started doing some stuff in Perl. It was the right tool.
Mm-hmm.
I always sign off with this, right? But it's the one thing that I've started saying a lot. It's to best explain, why do I, as a principal engineer, or you as a senior principal engineer, why do we make some of the technical decisions that we make? And we really end up making them a lot based off of what can go wrong, what technical debt will we accrue with it, right? And is that technical debt sustainable for my team and my group, right? This is like one of those Conway's law always applies thing, right? Like the structure of the code will reflect the communication structure for the org, or whatever. Like,
yep.
But so will your technical debt, right? It's really all aspects of it. So is that neat little, and this is what I like about the validated patterns process as well. It's like, this is that neat little spot in engineering where those two things marry, and they don't actually, they each make sense without the other, but they don't actually really start to look like a successful, viable thing until you put process plus technology together, right? And you get that with test automation, you get that with DevOps, you get that with this. And other thing I wanted to go back to is, looking at the design patterns. Design patterns are so important that I think we all basically have read a book which is just called Design Patterns, right?
Yep.
This
Gang
is
of Four.
so important to engineering holistically, and the fact that we're looking at this like not just like design patterns for like a piece of software. We're looking at this for an ecosystem, right? That's what we're doing here. We're creating design patterns for ecosystems. Here's how to succeed with an ecosystem. And from the application developer perspective of that, and like the SRE perspective of that, of like managing an ecosystem, it is a very like complex thing to navigate. And I get really excited about it all the time, like talking about it, working through it. Like I bore the heck out of all of my friends with this, because every time I talk to a new team, every time I talk to a different external customer, every time I get to go talk to people about this holistic architecture view, app topology, the interactions with OpenShift as a platform, right? Like even just going through people, like, here's OpenShift's opinions. There's not really like I've been putting together one, but there's not really like a great, perfect, concise list of OpenShift's opinions. We always say it's enterprise Kubernetes, it's opinionated Kubernetes. Like, but what are the opinions? There are a lot of really cool opinions in OpenShift. There are also some annoying ones. I love you, OpenShift, but it's true. You know what I mean?
Well, they say that you don't truly know a technology well until you can list 5 things you hate about it.
Yeah. Oh, that is a great saying. Yes, I have heard that now that you mention it, but I had honestly forgotten it. But yes, yeah. You don't know a technology well until you can say what you don't like about it, which goes back to choosing your technical debt, right? That's exactly it. You know a technology well when you can choose it based on technical debt, I think, as well. But yeah, I get super excited about this whole space. I get super excited about the fact that it's what did one of my mentors recently told me here at Red Hat. He recently was like, yeah, the thing that Red Hat really does well is not just selling the services and everything, but it is selling the access to our people, right? Because I'm an SRE. Well, I'm not really an SRE anymore. I don't know what I am, but I'm
Your chief
an
mermaid.
architect in the managed services space, I guess. And technically speaking, I'm not in a customer facing role, right? But Red Hat sells access to our people. So the fact that I can go and end up talking to external customers or go to a conference and meet with people or have this stream, right? And we get to talk about this and get that really like big picture of the world. It like is a little bit of a two-way street. Like we benefit from the fact that we're made accessible to everybody, and we benefit from being made accessible to everybody. And yes, I know that's the whole point of open source. I just like restated it differently. But I get excited about these efforts, the way we're allowed to approach them, and the fact that we're all kind of approaching the same thing, which makes there's 20,000 plus Red Hatters now, right? It's no longer easy to navigate the org charts and find somebody working on the same thing as you, because the degrees of separation start getting higher than like 3 to 5, right? And it really is the fact that we're doing it all in the public that makes it easy to kind of find each other through our various communities. The one thing I liked, I don't know if you guys actually use it, so I didn't bring it up on the screen. Yeah, no, it's totally there. The blog on the hybrid cloud patterns, right?
Oh, yes.
I'm going to show that real quick, and then I'll stop like pontificating here. Right, and I redo this a lot. Red Hat has a lot of different blogs. I'm looking at finishing up a post and submitting it to the architecture group blog myself. So like maybe that'll happen. Stay tuned. We'll see. From a personal standpoint, we're like right in the middle of all the high holy days. Yesterday was Yom Kippur, Sukkot's in a few days. Like I'm like a little bit of a mess at home because there's so many like things like happening. So like whether or not I get a blog out in the next few weeks, and then I'm leaving for a leadership face-to-face in back in Boston next week is a little iffy, but theoretically, hold me accountable. There should be a blog published by me coming out eventually. But yeah, our blogs are really cool. The fact that we put all this effort into writing these things up. And then there's the one on multi-cloud GitOps. I'm gonna actually put a link to this one in a little chatty there. But yeah, I don't even know if I have a plot to my my statements anymore, other than that I get really excited about this. So.
No, I mean, it's great. It's really one of the things about being an engineer in an effort like this is that you just don't know who is going to get interested and excited about the things that you're working on. There aren't necessarily a lot of feedback loops in this, because we're not attached to business units the way other engineering groups at Red Hat are. We don't have customers that are saying, your thing sucks, or, your thing's amazing, I love it. We just don't have the same kind of feedback loop. And so it's really rewarding, for me as an engineer to see that people are being able to consume this, getting value out of it, enjoying it, benefiting from it in whatever way. And again, it's not that we think, certainly not that I think that I've got the corner locked on, how to do multi-cloud GitOps. But these are all stepping stones. I see that, we can make this improvement. What's the next improvement? It may come from me, it may come from you, it may come from someone else. It may come from someone watching the stream because, they just found out about the effort for the first time. Although it looks like most of the people who are live on the stream with us are either on the team or, have been involved with the effort in some way already. But, you never know.
We do tend to cluster together, don't we? So there's a couple questions that I wanted to ask.
Sure.
So I guess the first thing is like, what when you're sitting there, okay, you've done a few validated patterns, like what drives the next, like how do you decide what the next pattern you want to look into is? since you don't have a BU, like, do you like just like, I want to know more about this technology, and then you learn something, you're like, I bet I can come up with a pattern on that, or is there some other like decision-making framework?
It's a lot of that. What the first few were driven. The first one was driven by, here's a thing that is really buzzworthy in the industry, and it's largely complete. We need to do something to show that the framework is able to comprehend all of this. So it's extension and interest in the framework itself, and validating that the framework is suitable for other kinds of problems. That was an industrial edge. For multi-cloud GitOps, the main driver for that was, okay, let's take the smallest idea that we think is interesting and valuable and show what that would look like in a validated pattern, because there is no way that people are going to start with industrial edge. The tops of their heads are going to come off, because there's so much going on with it. Medical diagnosis was an extension of, let's show a different AI ML problem than what industrial edge showed, to show that, there are different kinds of, problems that can be solved in different ways using similar but different technologies. Medical diagnosis also has Knative and some other cool things. Some of the interest is customer driven. Our consulting partners, we have a couple of members of the team from the consulting org, and we take a lot of user input about what is it that you think customers want to see. You talk to customers a lot more than we do. Where do customers have problems? Where do they have pain points? What sorts of things can we show in a pattern that would be interesting to them? For Ansible Edge GitOps, the primary driver was, we need to show that GitOps applies to Ansible as a product and to RHEL as a product, because we believe that there are 4 principles in GitOps, and that that we can satisfy all of these principles using these technologies. I remember one of Christian's last emails to us said, if you're going to say that Ansible is GitOps, make sure that it does these things. And we did, Christian. So,
I actually have, it's on my backlog of planned episodes, and I probably won't get to it this year because I'm pretty well locked into my plan for the end of this year. But I actually do have an episode plan, which is just Ansible is GitOps. And I know that Christian always makes fun of me because I love Ansible. Actually, a lot of people make fun of me because I love Ansible. So weird, because Ansible's a Red Hat product, and it's in the service delivery organization that I'm part of. But anyway, I love Ansible because I used it before I came to Red Hat, and it just was fantastic for what I had to do. And actually, interestingly enough, what I was working on was industrial IoT. And so what we were using Ansible there for was actually for, we were basically using it for multi-cloud GitOps, not a sophisticated pattern as this, right? But it's basically what we were using it for, and basically being able to really not just deploy to our cloud environments, but also like have like fine-grained control of our deployments in ways that were one, interactive, so anybody could do it, which is really helpful because we only had one person who was dedicated DevOps, so he needed to go on vacation. And that was why he used Ansible. He's like, look, guys, it's an interactive CLI. You just need to tell it which options you want, and it will do all of the things for you, right? So there was that aspect of it. And then the other thing was it allowed us to really play with blue-green environments and kind of set that stuff up. So that was really cool. And it just worked forever from that point on. Basically, unless GCP changed something, once it was set up, it just worked forever, which was fantastic. So that was, but yeah, no, the industrial IoT space is so weird. It's a very interesting space full of very, very interesting, very, very interesting use cases, right? There's not just one industrial IoT use case, right? There's factory floor, there's supply chain, there are building health and HVACs is a very, very common one, right? And
Oil and gas, human machine interface stuff.
Oil, gas, human machine interface, leak detection, trying to figure out using machine learning, predicting maintenance schedules, because extreme weather events can change the maintenance schedule on some of these environments, oil fields, or solar farms, wind farms, all of these other things. Leak detection is another huge part of industrial IoT, because some of these things are like steam pumps and other stuff, right? That if there should not be, some places you want moisture, some places there should be no moisture, right? So you have all of these humidity, brightness, all kinds of data points coming in to create a holistic picture of whatever it is you're trying to track in industrial IoT. Like, that is a fascinating topic. I spent nearly 4.5 years actually in that particular space on an IoT gateway for that space, actually. And so, but yeah, so the use case there is extremely compelling, but there is a high barrier to entry to understand the space, like you were saying. So medical was a really good one. So I guess the kind of question is like, what's next? What's in the process? Can you spoil it for us?
Oh yeah, sure. We've got two, maybe three patterns that are currently, the technical work on them is largely done. We're working on working with the authors to get more documentation and more of that stuff ready so that they're more consumable. But partner groups within Red Hat have, been working with a couple of Red Hat partners to have more extended demonstrations of partner products. And, Kong Gateway and Cockroach DB are both in the hybrid cloud patterns GitHub org, but are not yet represented on the website. So those are two patterns that have been developed by members that are outside the team, and that's a huge milestone for us too, because it says that the framework that we've been working on can be consumed by other people. We've done a lot of consulting with them to make sure that they're using it right, and we're available to make sure that they're doing the things that they're doing things the way we expect them to, and several things like that. But that's a huge growth thing for us. Because the framework really shows its utility and versatility when people who don't work with it on a day-to-day basis can pull it off the shelf and do something interesting with it. So that's absolutely fascinating and really exciting for us. Personally, I'm working on a pattern that demonstrates a retail use case. I come from a retail background. I spent a lot of years working for a major retailer. And I still got a lot of love in my heart for, the retail space and the complexities of the retail business model. So I'm working on the retail pattern. We're working within the framework. We in this year have delivered a number of improvements to sort of solve some of the traditional challenges of operating in a Kubernetes environment. One of the limitations of, the Argo CD and Helm approach is that you have very limited access to knowledge about what is actually running on a cluster. And so when you have things like security trusts to set up, you absolutely have to have data that can only be gotten from a running cluster. You need a PKI, certificates. You need tokens, and those things are only generated by a running cluster. They're not represented in any Git artifacts. So we developed an approach to solving this particular problem that uses Ansible core inside the Kubernetes cluster to be able to, in a general way, grab some of that, runtime based information. And our belief and contention is that it holds true to the spirit of GitOps. We haven't had a serious discussion about whether it holds the letter of GitOps or not. We may yet get a chance to have that conversation in public. But we've been working on enhancing the framework to be able to cover a lot of these things. This notion of having secure secret storage was one of the first major improvements that went into the framework, because the story of secrets and how you manage secrets in Kubernetes, there are a number of approaches to it. We very definitely committed to one path, and a couple of branches down that path. We have specific reasons for doing it. The main one being that we wanted to make it so that the framework did not impose too many restrictions on external charts or other artifacts that you were deploying into your cluster from outside. So that's why we took the approach of saying, you can use the external secrets operator to publish secrets objects. And so the secret object can be managed by your secure secret store as brokered by the external secrets operator, instead of, going with sidecars or, some other CSI based approach to secrets management or sealed secrets. We did not take the sealed secrets approach.
I was muted because I'm typing, and I have the clicky. I've become one of those developers I never thought I'd be, where I have the clickiest, clackiest keyboard at the mechanical. I wasn't even typing anything important. I don't know what happened to my caption that reminds people to like and subscribe, but I'm gonna remind people to like and subscribe without the caption. So just so I don't forget, it's kind of important thing. My continued ability to do this is 100% based on likes and subscribes. No, it's not like they would ever make me stop, but it does definitely help continue the streams if you like and subscribe. So please do that. I'm trying to make sure that it's my, oh gosh, Johnny. My clicky clacky keyboard is apparently my alpha nerdness, which just keeps increasing as I get older, I guess. Which is just a terrible joke from, was it the Ask an OpenShift admin stream? Is that where that one happened? I think that's where that one happened, when I went on that stream and was, explaining why S3 is not your sysadmin, right? It's funny because the timing on this is conversation, it's never not relevant, I think, to my day-to-day job. So it's I'm almost like, wow, what a coincidence. But it's actually not a coincidence. It's just that this particular body of work of validated patterns is literally super relevant to my job. I was actually just working through a prototype for a dashboard. Honestly, I need to do a report every week. I need to be able to present a lot of data in kind of an interesting way, and it's going to an executive leadership audience, right? And so I don't know what they're going to necessarily want from it, right? So I was actually just looking at, I've been putting together this, although I've spent more time arguing with my development environment because I had zombie containered processes using up all of my sockets, then I've actually spent working on putting together this dashboard. But I've been working on a pattern. I realized it could really be a pattern for using 3Scale, Red Hat Opens API Manager's open source 3Scale, Grafana, and a Postgres database, right? So I went through my data models and all this other stuff. For those who don't know, 3Scale does API management. So you can have, it kind of takes care of all the authenticating to the API and a lot of the actual schema and everything. So it's really just kind of putting these three components together, wiring them up, and then basically having a form that I can have people put data into, which can eventually be a further automated collection of data from various data sources into kind of creating a business intelligence dashboard, which is a little bit, I actually looked it up. Grafana actually does have use cases for business intelligence dashboards. I think we're all used to it for alerting, but they do this. And I was thinking to myself as I'm doing it, man, I'm going to open source this once I'm done. And I realized I should just make it a pattern. I should just see if I can get it to that standard where it can qualify for this community. Sure.
I think that sounds really interesting. Just out of curiosity, are you using the crunchy Postgres operator?
The answer to that immediately is no. And that only has to do with I was starting to run into some local resource limits on my machine when I was doing all of these operators. And I was like, I just need to get the SQL query, the SQL queries to create the database and everything done. I'll just do it in vanilla Postgres while I'm doing it locally. And then I probably will switch to the like the Crunchy or one of the other operators for Postgres in an
No,
actual cloud.
Crunchy is amazing.
Yeah.
I've been using Crunchy for the retail pattern, and like I cannot tell you how exciting. Like Crunchy expresses more of the aspirations and goals of operators than almost any other operator I've seen or used.
I think the only other one that is on a similar level is the CouchDB operator. Is also like, it's like, these are like, I think the only 2 level 5s. Maybe there are a couple others, right? They're completely amazing. But yeah, no, it was just that an operator has a slightly larger footprint in terms of resource usage.
No, I get that.
Than one Postgres pod, and since I'm doing it locally and my computer's already trying to overheat,
Right.
I'm coming up on my 2-year tech refresh, and I'm actually like, ooh, I'm gonna actually need it, I think. Or I can just put it in the cloud and but I just didn't feel like having an OpenShift cluster up somewhere for this while I'm just working on it locally. But anyway, all that to say, sockets, it took me 7 hours to get code ready containers to have available sockets. And then later the next day, when the same problem resurfaced, I realized that there's a way to use iNotify and actually see what's using up all the sockets. And then I was like, oh, what are these container deprocesses? Like, they're just zombied from a past computer crash from when I was running, Kind.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was when I was running Kind. I'm not actually sure. Just hanging out, like 10 of them using 137 sockets each. I'm like, well, geez, no wonder. Like, what is happening? But like, it wasn't showing up, and I was looking to see, things that were running. It wasn't showing, but they weren't using a bunch of CPU or anything else that like I was kind of checking by initially to see what was happening. And all this is to say, I spent like 9 hours debugging the dumbest thing. I spent more time debugging my environment than I spent actually building the thing. And I think that hopefully I can get that dashboard prototyped out soon.
Well, it's just like the old saying, your keys are always in the last place you look, because once you find them, you don't need to look for them anymore. It's.
And then I thought I was being clever, and I was like, man, if I did an echo of my path, and it was like a hot mess. And I was like, how did I do that to myself? I know how I did it to myself, because when you install things from the binaries and you're just lazily following along their README and you copy and paste it in, or like you put it in the path it tells you to, and like nobody's standardized on this. Like some people are doing like user local bin, some people are just doing like bin, or like depending on the README, right? So I ended up with like all of these things defined in my path. And I was like, oh, this is terrible. I'm just going to get it all like reconciled down to user local bin, fix that, clean it all up, make my path less. And I forgot that the OC version that is in user local bin on my computer was the very, very first OC client version that I had installed. It was 3.11. So then all of a sudden, all the OC stuff's not working, and I'm not making the connections because I've just spent all this time figuring out this what do you call it? This socket problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I go and I'm asking for help. And somebody's like, well, what version of OC are you using? And I do OC version, and my face. Well, it must have been hilarious if somebody had been there to see my face, because I'm just like, how? Like, I use tools that require OC and would have failed miserably if I'd been using 3.11 this whole time, right? So I know, like, I actively know I've upgraded because I've had to upgrade OC for some of those tools to work with new features, right? So I know, like, I've not been using 3.11 this whole time. So I'm like, how, right? I'm like, so then I'm like, okay, which OC? And there it is, user local bin. I'm like, oh my God, like I do, an expanded LS on that. I'm like, I created it in 2020. Oh my, all this to say, someday all of these debugging efforts that were so hair-tearingly frustrating could hopefully end up somewhere reusable. And I will check out the medical diagnosis pattern for the Grafana resources and data sources. Because that sounds very.
I can send you a link to my current use of the Crunchy operator in the retail pattern, which I think you may find interesting.
Yeah, I probably will. I think the thing that took me the longest to work out was not what tools roughly I want to use. That's like the easy part. It was what is my data model going to look like? I think I did 6 iterations over my data model and how many tables there needed to be and everything else like that before I came to something that looked like it would scale correctly with the correct relational pieces. And I've like, I don't design databases every day. That was terrible. But if it works, right? If it works, it'll be pretty awesome. And maybe we'll see it here. I'm pointing to you guys can't see my screen. I'm pointing to my screen that has the validated patterns window up on it still.
Yeah. I mean, this is the biggest test. The biggest test of anything that you engineer is, can people use it for something that they didn't have in mind when you designed it? And, like, this is, kind of closer to some of those things, but, we are very, very eager and excited to see people pick up the framework and see what they can do with it. And, in so doing, learn what's good about it, what needs to be improved about it, what we can do better.
Yep. Wow. Sorry. I'm just looking at the, I know we're over time, and I will actually end this roughly on time, I promise. Right. I was just looking at the medical diagnosis pattern, and everything that's going on over here, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a cool use of Grafana. I'm gonna find some probably very useful things in here, and yeah, absolutely on the CrunchyDB as well. Anything that makes my life working with databases, which I almost never do, easier is appreciated. Yep.
And that is actually like a perfect way to close it out, because the whole point of the Sierpinski triangle is that inside every pattern is are more sub patterns that you can pull out of the pattern and use. That's why we adopted the Sierpinski triangle as our logo.
So who do I have to bribe to get one of those for my little background here?
Anthony Herr.
Anthony Herr, right? Just like slide some reward zone points under the door or something. Anthony, I'm gonna come talk to you. I want one of those thingies. They're amazing. All right. That said, we are over time. Thank everybody for staying late with us. Thank you, Martin, for coming on here and talking about this. I definitely hope to see us working more closely together in the future. Like I said, I don't see how we succeed in our respective missions without that collaboration, and I know that I'm excited about it. I don't think I have any other final closing thoughts. So I'm gonna attempt. We'll see how it goes. Again, I'm not the best at this. I'm going to attempt to play our little like video clippy thingies that like correctly wind up the stream, and then never ever in my life attempt this without Johnny again, because he's my hero. So that's it. Good afternoon, good evening, good night to everybody. And like I always say, and like was very relevant today, choose your technical debt wisely. We will see you in 2 weeks.